But he does talk about the Tonga, which I will get into in a bit here. But I just wanted to foreshadow his research, and I have his channel on mine as a favorites, and I would just I would encourage all of you to subscribe to his channel and start showing some activity, so that perhaps he might come back, because I believe he's kind of given up on his research. But he's got 4 videos out there which are all very interesting, and they do relate to what I'm looking at now. Now, if we move on to the Ural Mountains, the Ural Mountains are very interesting. They're the mountains that are considered to separate Europe from Asia. They have a very distinct coordinate, 60 degrees north, 60 degrees east. You can see that here. Now, as I was looking at the Ural Mountains here, I noticed that they laid almost perfectly central to my 2 lines that I had drawn here. And let me get into why I have this line and this line drawn here. If you're familiar with my other videos, my first original 2 lines were these 2, based off of Teotihuacan, Stonehenge, the pyramids, Nazca, Easter Island, Angkor Wat. This cuts through all the major cities and capitals on the East Coast. And I noticed that at this point here was the widest point of these 2 lines, and I made a perpendicular line. And I followed that perpendicular line, and it took me to this strange anomaly here. Very strange anomaly in the ground. And I didn't really understand at the time. I thought perhaps it was a pole shift, or a former pole, and I didn't really understand what it was. But I knew it was something important. And so I always kept it in the back of my mind. But I had this line that cut directly through it, and I also had the meridian line cut directly through it. And it was a very strange intersection. And so I always was having that in the back of my mind. Now, as I was continuing my research, I realized something incredibly important. And that was that, 1, the Nazca lines are connected to Angkor Wat. And they're connected in a way that is a perfect 180-degree line. And they also come into intersection with this central axis hub here. Then I also noticed I had a strong interest in Easter Island and the Rongo Rongo text in Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley script, and the strong iconography similarities, comparisons of their languages, of Rongo Rongo and Indus Valley. So we have Easter Island here, and we have Mohenjo-Daro here, on the complete opposite sides of the earth. Now, because this is an island, it's not 100% perfect. I would say it's more of a 179-degree line rather than a 180-degree line. However, once again, these 2 lines intersected at our axis point here. And so I started looking at this, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. There's something more to this. And I was thinking it had to do with some sort of geometria, some sort of symbolism at the time. And I thought, well, you know what? I've got these lines between these 2 locations, between Angkor Wat and Nazca, between Mohenjo-Daro and Easter Island, I'm just going to extend them out. And when I did that, I realized something amazing. And that was that these lines hit the coastlines, just like I had noticed before, where these lines cut through the Mediterranean. This line cuts through the ocean. This line comes right through the thinnest part of Central America. This line goes across the east coast. This line comes across the west coast. It comes to Peru. This line here cuts through the Sea of Japan. This line here comes to Indonesia. Coming from Mohenjo-Daro, we come straight down to the coast of Africa. These were major trade routes. These locations were selected as major trade routes. This was the central hub. Now, the Hyperboreans were considered to be north of the Boreas wind. And the Boreas wind, they believed, came from this direction. Once again, I'll show you again. Here is Hyperborea. So, if we follow that here, it takes us straight to that same point. And if we follow this line, it comes through the Ural Mountains, which they describe and which scholars believe represent the mountains that they described as Hyperborea being beyond. But if we follow that through, I made this come straight through Amman, Jordan. Now, if you remember, in Amman, we have in the ground a representation of Horus, just like we have a representation of the owl in Washington, D.C. And we have all sorts of bird representations in Peru, in Nazca. But what is even more amazing is that this line here takes us to a location known as Mount Nemrut, or you can also say Nimrod. That is an ancient burial mound with amazing statues. I'll take you to that real quick here. Should have had this up. There's just unreal, uncanny photos here. So here you can see a reconstructed version of Mount Nemrut, and behind it is an artificial mountaintop. And this is an artificial mound, just like the ancient mound builders used, or the Scythians. They would all build mounds and royal royal tombs, and they would bury the mounds, and they would have competitions to see who could bury it the most. And so this is an artificial mountaintop of gravel. So you have that Mount Nemrut, and then you also have Göbekli Tepe. You also have Göbekli Tepe right here. So not only do you have major monuments that lie here, you have Troy, you have the Bosnian pyramids, you have Stonehenge, all the way down to Teotihuacan. Not only does this line in every major city along the east coast of the United States, now we have another line here that incorporates Mount Nemrut and Göbekli Tepe, and it takes us to the north. All right? And you know, I've always questioned the Pillars of Hercules and what these were. And if you look, if I opened up Stellarium right now, you have all of the Hercules mythology to the north. So if I were to show you, if we were to look to the north, and his travels to the Garden of Hesperides, you can see Hercules here. And if we show him coming up, there we have Hercules above Draco. And so when you look at his direction of being north in the sky, and you look at the direction that they believed Hyperborea was, and the direction that they have put our prime meridian, which comes and intersects straight through this point here, all the myths start to make sense. We start to see how important this was and how this was a trade route for mankind, ancient man. Now, how they did that was with a device known as an astrolabe. And this device is actually, it was used by Muslims in the Middle Ages. This device here, it was used by Muslims in the Middle Ages to find the direction to pray towards Mecca. Now this helps them even find the time of day. And it's a very interesting device, and I recommend everyone look into how it works. However, the origins, the oldest one that they found is in ancient Greece. They're giving an estimate of 150 BC. We also have the Antikythera mechanism, which was a geared version of an astrolabe. And this reveals their technology that existed at the time and how they had the capabilities to find whatever direction they wish to go in a straight line. And what we have here is the mapping, and they used these monuments and these cities as their directions and how to find major areas of civilization for trade. And they used this device. And so, when I was over here, I noticed how the Ural Mountains came right through the middle of these two lines. This is the Mohenjo-Daro Easter Island line. This is actually the Rose line here, or the Paris Meridian line. It's also known as the Serpent Rogue, or the Red Serpent. And if you look at symbology of the Ouroboros, serpent that wraps around the world, things start to make a little more sense now. And this line also extends down into the Rennes-le-Château, the famous castle that with a lot of mystery behind it. That rose line also comes through there. And the interesting thing, when I took a protractor to this, the rose line gives me perfect 90-degree angles, whereas the current prime meridian line does not. It's a couple degrees off. And so this line is actually, I believe, the correct line that was used. So I want to take your attention now to the people of Derinkuyu. And what they did was they built something on the level of building the pyramids of Egypt. What they did was they built an underground complex that housed 20,000 people. Not only 20,000 people, they were able to put livestock down there. They were able to put all the resources they need. They had ventilation shafts that reached every square inch of this complex. And just to give you an idea of what it was like, here's an example. Here's a picture of it here.